Ladies and gentlemen, my brother said into the mic, grinning under crystal chandeliers, let's all give a round of applause to my stinky sister. She finally found a dress that doesn't smell like failure. 200 people laughed. Not the awkward kind, the real kind, the kind that swells and echoes and lets you know you're the punchline. I felt it bounce off marble floors and climb up the gold-trimmed walls of the ballroom like it belonged there. My brother basked in it. His new partners chuckled into champagne flutes. Investors smirked like they'd just been given permission to look down on me. And my mother, she smiled, not a nervous smile, not a conflicted one, a proud smile, like this was normal. Like I deserved it. I didn't flinch, I didn't storm out, I didn't cry or correct him or make a scene. I just stood there with my glass of club soda, shoulders relaxed, breathing slow, letting the heat move through my chest instead of explode out of it. Because when you've been underestimated your whole life, you learn something early. Reacting is what they expect. Silence is what scares them later. This was my brother's merger party, his big moment, as everyone kept calling it. The culmination of years of chest-thumping speeches, flashy cars, and fake humility on LinkedIn. Two companies becoming one, a celebration of growth, trust, and vision. That's what the banners said, that's what the press release said. But the truth was humming underneath all that music, and I could hear it clearly. He lifted his glass again, still riding the high. She's harmless, he added, waving a dismissive hand in my direction. Always has been. Family charity case? More laughter. I made eye contact with him for half a second, just long enough to let him see I was fully present, fully aware, calm. Then I smiled back. If you're enjoying stories where the quiet one isn't as weak as everyone thinks, go ahead and subscribe now, because this is just the beginning. People assume silence means surrender. They confuse humility with incompetence. They see someone standing alone in a corner and think, oh, she didn't make it. What they don't consider is that sometimes the person standing still is the one counting exits, memorizing faces, and taking mental notes while everyone else is busy congratulating themselves. I watched the room carefully after that. I watched who laughed the loudest, who avoided my eyes, who leaned in toward my brother like he was sunlight. I watched how servers whispered to each other, how security stood too relaxed, how certain names on the guest list didn't match the stories I'd been told. This wasn't just humiliation, it was confirmation. Every old family memory came rushing back at once, being talked over at dinners, being told to be realistic, being introduced as the creative one like that was code for unemployed. My brother had always been the golden child, the closer, the winner, the one who understood business, and I had always been the afterthought. But here's what no one in that room knew: I wasn't there out of obligation. I wasn't there to support him, and I definitely wasn't there to beg for approval. I was there because I had a reason. The chandeliers glittered above us like 1,000 tiny eyes, and for the first time I realized how fitting that was. This room was built for appearances, for performance, for illusions of power, and illusions are fragile things. I took another slow sip of my drink and let the laughter fade around me. My brother turned away, already chasing the next handshake, the next ego stroke, convinced the moment was over. It wasn't. It was just the first move. What none of them knew was that this humiliation was familiar territory for me, and long ago it taught me exactly how to survive. I grew up in a town so small the high school mascot doubled as the town logo, painted on water towers and diner menus like a warning label. Expect nothing big from here. We had one stoplight, two churches that competed like rival sports teams, and a main street where gossip moved faster than ambulances. My brother thrived there. I learned to disappear. From the time we were kids, he was celebrated for things I was scolded for. When he talked loudly, it was confidence. When I spoke up, it was attitude. If he forgot homework, teachers gave him grace. If I missed a detail, it was proof I wasn't trying hard enough. Family dinners turned into highlight reels of his minor wins, while my accomplishments were treated like flukes that needed explaining. My mother had a phrase she used often: he just has it. No one ever asked what it was. We all knew what she meant. When money got tight, my brother's extracurriculars stayed. Mine disappeared. When college applications came around, his fees were covered without discussion. I was told to be practical and consider community college close to home. It wasn't cruelty in the obvious sense. It was quieter than that. Death by lowered expectations, so I learned early how to operate without applause. I worked odd jobs cleaning offices after hours, filing paperwork for businesses that didn't bother to learn my name. I listened more than I spoke. I watched how adults negotiated, how they lied politely, how they smiled while keeping score. While everyone assumed I was drifting, I was collecting patterns. My brother left town with a send-off party. I left with a borrowed suitcase and no ceremony. He studied business. I studied people. That's the part no one ever noticed. While he was networking loudly, I was building quietly. While he was posting wins online, I was learning skills that didn't photograph well. I figured out systems, learned how money actually moves, how reputations are manufactured, how leverage hides in boring places. I didn't announce promotions, I didn't update relatives, I didn't correct anyone when they assumed I was still finding myself. Letting them underestimate me was easier than explaining anything. And honestly, it was useful. Because every holiday I came back, my role was already assigned. The harmless sister, the one who didn't need much, the one who could sit at the kids' table metaphorically forever. My brother would talk about growth curves and acquisitions like he'd invented ambition itself. People nodded. I nodded too. Inside, I was taking notes. There's a strange freedom that comes with being overlooked. No one watches your hands when they think they know your limits. No one checks your math when they assume you're not playing the same game. You get to move without resistance. By the time my brother announced his game-changing merger, I already knew it wasn't what it looked like. Not because I had insider access, because I recognized the signs, the rushed timelines, the overconfident language, the way certain questions were dodged instead of answered. Patterns don't lie, people do. So when that invitation arrived, heavy cardstock, embossed lettering, my name spelled correctly for once, I didn't feel honored. I felt curious enough to accept. Standing in that ballroom, hearing myself reduced to a joke under crystal chandeliers wasn't new pain. It was an old echo, familiar, manageable. What was new was the timing. Because while my family thought this party marked my brother's arrival, I knew it marked something else entirely. A peak. And peaks are dangerous places to stand too long. The truth is, while they were busy remembering me as the girl who never left town, I'd already learned exactly how to make people believe what you want them to see. The funny thing about being underestimated is how long people cling to that version of you, even when the evidence changes. Especially family, especially in small towns where memories harden into facts. To them, I was still the girl who left quietly, the one who didn't ask for help, the one whose life never became a story worth retelling. Every time I visited, relatives asked the same questions with the same tone. So, what are you doing these days? Not curiosity, confirmation. They wanted reassurance that the family hierarchy was still intact. I gave it to them. Oh, a little consulting, I'd say. Nothing too exciting. That sentence did a lot of work for me. What I didn't say was that consulting meant being brought in when things were already broken, when partners didn't trust each other. When numbers didn't line up, when someone needed to know who was lying without starting a war. I learned how to step into messy rooms and walk out with leverage, not credit. I learned how power really works. Not the loud kind my brother loved, the quiet kind that moves behind closed doors and smiles politely while rearranging outcomes. I also learned restraint. Anyone can react. Anyone can expose something the moment they discover it. That's what amateurs do. Professionals wait. They let the other person build the stage, invite the audience, and turn on the lights themselves. So when I started noticing cracks in my brother's story, I didn't confront him, I didn't warn my parents, I didn't hint, I observed. His success had always felt accelerated, not impossible, just oddly smooth. Doors opening too fast, partnerships announced before the groundwork made sense, big promises backed by vague explanations. The kind of momentum that looks impressive until you ask what's actually holding it up. And I was very good at asking questions that didn't sound like questions. I listened to podcasts he guested on. I read interviews twice. I followed the trail of people who suddenly weren't mentioned anymore, former partners. Quiet exits, restructures with cheerful press releases and no details. Patterns again. I started mapping timelines not on paper but in my head, when deals were announced versus when they should have matured, who benefited immediately. Who vanished? None of it was illegal on the surface. That's what made it elegant. That's what made it dangerous. At the same time, my family dynamic stayed frozen in amber. My mother still corrected my posture at dinner. My brother still interrupted me mid-sentence. If I pushed back, I was being sensitive. If I stayed calm, I was finally maturing. They never imagined I was choosing silence, not defaulting to it. At one family gathering, my brother joked about how I never liked pressure, said with a wink like it was affection. Everyone laughed. I laughed too, because pressure doesn't scare me, exposure does, and I wasn't the one at risk of that. What hurt most wasn't the jokes, it was the certainty behind them. The way my family knew who I was so completely, so confidently, without ever checking if that version was still accurate. But certainty is brittle. The more my brother expanded his public image, the more fragile it became. Every boast locked him into a narrative. Every exaggerated claim narrowed his options. He was building a tower out of words and trust, and all towers depend on people agreeing not to look too closely at the foundation. I wasn't going to shove it over. I was going to invite everyone to inspect it. By the time I confirmed what was really holding my brother's empire together, I also realized how easily it could fall apart without anyone touching it directly. By the time I was certain something was wrong, I already knew better than to rush toward the truth like it owed me honesty. Truth doesn't reveal itself to impatience. It rewards structure, so I built structure. I started far away from my brother on purpose. I looked at the ecosystem around him instead of the man himself. Vendors, consultants, junior executives who cycled in and out quickly. People who'd been close enough to see things but far enough away to be disposable. The kind of people success stories quietly erase, and I noticed something familiar. Everyone who left did so politely. No public fights. No dramatic exits, just vague LinkedIn posts about new opportunities and grateful chapters. That kind of uniform calm doesn't happen naturally, it's curated, managed. I also noticed how often my brother used the word trust when he spoke. Too often, people who deserve trust don't keep reminding you of it. At the same time, my family continued treating me like background noise. My mother would call to ask how my brother was doing, never me. My father repeated his achievements to friends like he'd personally signed the contracts. I was still the afterthought, the footnote, and I let them keep that image. Because while they were busy protecting him emotionally, no one was protecting him structurally. I started having quiet conversations, not confrontational ones, casual ones. I'd reach out to people with a simple premise. I'm researching leadership patterns for a private project. That was true, just not the whole truth. People love to talk when they don't feel accused. A former analyst mentioned reporting discrepancies that were resolved internally. A consultant joked about being paid twice, then quickly changed the subject. Someone else described meetings where numbers were adjusted after decisions were announced, not before. Little things, individually harmless, together, a rhythm. It wasn't fraud in the obvious sense, it was something slipperier. Something that lived in gray areas and plausible deniability. My brother wasn't stealing, he was rearranging reality, shifting obligations, presenting projections as outcomes, selling confidence backed by selective truth. The kind of behavior that collapses the moment too many people compare notes. That's when I understood what my role actually was. I wasn't an avenger, I wasn't a whistleblower, I wasn't even a rival. I was a mirror, and mirrors don't attack. They just reflect until the person looking can't stand what they see anymore. The merger party suddenly made sense in a new way. It wasn't celebration, it was insulation. A way to surround himself with validation, prestige, and social proof before the cracks widened. Crystal chandeliers, high-status laughter, family loyalty on display. He wanted witnesses, not to the truth but to his version of it. And that was a mistake, because witnesses don't just see what you show them, they remember what they feel, and once doubt enters a room full of powerful people, it spreads faster than belief ever did. Still, I waited. I didn't gather documents. I gathered timing. I didn't expose facts. I prepared pressure points. Because the goal wasn't justice, it was inevitability, and inevitability doesn't look like revenge when it arrives, it looks like gravity. My brother thought he was standing at the top of his life. My family thought this was his coronation. Everyone thought the story was finished. It wasn't. It was finally ready to be told in the right order. What I uncovered next wasn't just risky for my brother, it threatened to drag everyone who defended him into the fallout. The first real confirmation didn't come from a document, it came from a pause. I was on a call with someone who had worked closely with my brother during the early stages of the merger, smart, cautious, the kind of person who chooses words like they're stepping on thin ice. We were talking about timelines, about how quickly certain approvals had come through when I asked a simple question that sounded harmless enough. Who actually signed off on that valuation adjustment? Silence, not confusion. Not laughter, silence, the kind where you can hear someone calculating what answering might cost them. That was already handled, they finally said. By the time it came to us, it was framed as settled. Framed. That word told me everything. I didn't push. I thanked them and ended the call politely. Pushing would have broken the spell. People only reveal the truth when they feel safe not revealing it fully. After that, things started lining up faster than I expected. Not because I rushed, but because once you know what to listen for, the truth trips over itself. My brother's success wasn't built on lies alone. It was built on borrowed credibility. He leaned on reputations that weren't his, invoked partnerships that were overstated, and relied heavily on the assumption that no one would cross-check as long as the narrative felt good. And most people didn't, because checking ruins the vibe. The merger hinged on perceived momentum, on confidence masquerading as certainty, on the idea that everyone else had already done the diligence, so why bother now? That's how sophisticated failure happens, not with villains twirling mustaches, but with rooms full of people quietly choosing convenience. What made it dangerous wasn't that it was illegal, it was that it was unsustainable. If even one assumption cracked, the rest would follow. Contracts built on optimism unravel fast when scrutiny replaces applause. And then I saw the real threat, not to my brother but to my family. My parents had vouched for him socially, introduced him to people who trusted them, put their reputations on the line without realizing it. If things collapsed publicly, they wouldn't just be embarrassed. They'd be implicated not legally but reputationally. The kind of stain that doesn't wash out easily in the circles my brother cared about. That's when the anger sharpened, not loud anger, focused anger. Because this wasn't just about being mocked under chandeliers anymore. This was about being used as emotional collateral, about watching the same people who dismissed me put everything they had behind someone who didn't deserve their loyalty or understand its cost. I realized something else then, too. My brother didn't fear failure, he feared being seen accurately, so that's what I prepared. I didn't collect evidence to expose him outright. I collected contradictions, statements that couldn't coexist. Promises that required impossible math, narratives that depended on everyone staying politely silent. All I had to do was arrange the room, let the right people talk to each other, let the questions surface naturally. Let my brother do what he always did, over-explain. He'd already built the trap. I was just going to stop warning him where it was, and the best part, no one would ever know I pushed. Once I understood exactly what my brother was hiding and why designing his fall became less about revenge and more about precision. By the time I finished mapping everything out, I realized my brother wasn't reckless, he was insulated. That was the real danger. He didn't just rely on charm and momentum, he relied on buffers, people who absorbed risk for him, advisors who cleaned language, partners who smoothed edges, family who defended him reflexively. He'd built a human shield out of loyalty, ego, and plausible deniability, and I was standing outside it, completely ignored, perfect position. The hidden truth wasn't one explosive secret, it was a chain. A series of small distortions stacked so neatly that no one bothered to check whether the base was solid. Numbers adjusted temporarily, commitments redefined mid-conversation, verbal assurances standing in for written guarantees. Everyone trusted that someone else had verified it. No one had, except me. What made this cruel, what made it effective, was that the system rewarded him for it. As long as confidence stayed high, reality didn't matter. Reputation became currency, appearances became armor, so I stopped thinking about exposure. I started thinking about erosion. You don't destroy something like my brother's world by attacking it head-on. You let it collapse under its own weight by removing certainty one grain at a time. I reconnected with people he assumed were irrelevant, former collaborators who'd been quietly sidelined. Investors who felt something was off but didn't want to look foolish asking. Executives who suspected gaps but didn't want to be the first to say it out loud. I didn't accuse, I asked. Questions are dangerous because they don't give people something to defend against, only something to think about. Did you ever see that assumption validated? Who confirmed that timeline? Was that adjustment documented or just discussed? I never repeated answers. I let them sit with their own discomfort. And slowly the same concerns started surfacing in different rooms from different mouths. That's when momentum shifted, not publicly, internally. Meetings started running longer, follow-ups multiplied. Smiles got tighter. My brother responded the only way he knew how, by doubling down, more confidence, bigger reassurances, faster promises, which only widened the cracks. At home, my family still treated him like a hero. Still dismissed me as neutral. My mother once said, "You should be proud of your brother, he's built something real." I agreed, out loud. Inside, I knew reality was about to demand proof. Here's the part no one talks about. Downfall doesn't feel dramatic while it's happening, it feels administrative. Emails, clarifications, revised expectations, the slow realization that what you thought was solid is actually conditional, and conditionals scare powerful people. I timed everything carefully. I didn't want chaos. I wanted a moment where my brother would need the room's belief and not have it anymore. Right before the climax, while tensions were already humming, I let one final conversation happen. Not with him, with someone he couldn't afford to disappoint. If you're still listening, this is where you might want to stay close, because the next move didn't involve confrontation at all. It involved absence. When the moment finally came, my brother would step onto a stage expecting applause and find something far more unsettling waiting for him. The room was set for celebration again, different venue, same energy. A private investor summit this time, smaller crowd, higher stakes. No chandeliers, just clean glass walls and skyline views meant to signal seriousness. This was where my brother planned to lock in the final confidence that would carry him for years. He walked in like nothing could touch him. I didn't. That was the first disruption. When people expect you to be present and you're not, it creates a vacuum, and vacuums pull attention. A few heads turned. Someone asked where I was. Someone else shrugged. The moment passed, but the absence lingered. My brother opened with his usual ease, same practiced cadence, same assurances that everything was aligned, validated, already in motion. He spoke faster than usual, but no one called it out. They rarely do at first. Then the questions started, not aggressive ones, polite ones, the kind that sound like curiosity but carry weight. Can you clarify how that projection accounts for the revised timeline? Who signed off on that assumption after the last adjustment? Is there documentation for that alignment, or is it still pending? My brother smiled through it. He always did. Confidence first, answers second. But this time the room didn't nod. Someone flipped through notes. Another checked their tablet. A third leaned back, arms crossed, not hostile, just attentive. The kind of attention that strips performance bare. That's when I arrived, late enough to matter, quiet enough to be noticed. I took a seat near the back, said hello to no one, and opened my notebook like I was just another observer. My brother's eyes found me immediately. Surprise flickered across his face, then relief. Family presence meant support. He straightened slightly. Mistake, because I wasn't there to defend him. I was there to be seen, not defending him. The questions resumed, sharper now. My brother answered, but his language shifted. More qualifiers, more as discussed. Less certainty. The room felt it. People always do. At one point, an investor asked a question that had no good answer. Not because it was unfair, but because the truth behind it couldn't survive daylight. My brother hesitated, just a beat too long, and in that pause, everything he'd built on confidence alone started to wobble. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Silence, when it's intentional, is louder than accusation. If you're still following this story, now's a good moment to subscribe, because what happened next changed everything, and it didn't happen the way anyone expected. The meeting ended without disaster. No shouting, no scenes, just unresolved tension, polite goodbyes, promises to circle back. But belief had cracked, and once belief cracks, power leaks. People didn't leave angry, they left uncertain. They compared notes, they replayed answers. They realized they'd all been assuming someone else had verified the same things. No one wants to be the last one holding faith when everyone else is quietly letting go. My brother tried to laugh it off afterward, tried to make it sound like a win, tried to pull me aside like we were allies. I smiled. I said nothing, because the collapse wasn't going to be loud, it was going to be social. What followed wasn't an explosion, it was a slow, public unraveling where everyone pretended not to notice who had stopped returning my brother's calls. The unraveling didn't announce itself, it crept. At first, it looked like scheduling issues, meetings pushed back, calls answered by assistants instead of principals. Emails that used to get replies in minutes now took days or never came at all. My brother told himself it was normal. Growth pains, busy seasons. He repeated those phrases like affirmations, but rooms don't lie. I watched it happen from a distance, always present enough to be visible, never close enough to interfere. People started treating him differently, not cold, just careful. They asked for confirmations in writing. They requested follow-ups. They stopped laughing at his jokes. That's when the social math changed. In the circles my brother lived for, status isn't measured by money alone. It's measured by who returns your calls, who vouches for you, who sits beside you without being asked. One by one, those signals faded. And the most brutal part, no one accused him of anything, they just adjusted. An investor mentioned reevaluating priorities. A partner talked about alignment concerns. A sponsor said the timing no longer felt right. Language softened while doors closed. My brother chased clarity and got courtesy instead. At home, the shift hit harder. My parents noticed before he did. Invitations slowed, friends asked fewer questions. That proud glow my mother wore when she said his name dimmed into worry. For the first time, she asked me what I thought was happening. I shrugged. "I'm sure it's nothing," I said gently. "These things happen." The irony didn't escape me. My brother tried to regain control the only way he knew how, by performing harder, louder confidence. Bigger promises, but confidence without belief is just noise, and people were already turning the volume down. Then came the moment that sealed it. At a public panel, one he'd insisted on attending to set the record straight, he was asked a question he'd dodged too many times already. Nothing aggressive, just precise. The kind of question that demands either proof or humility. He chose neither. He talked around it, over it, past it, and the audience felt it. No boos, no gasps, just a collective tightening. The kind of silence that spreads through a room when credibility quietly exits through the back door. Clips circulated afterward. Not viral, worse, shared privately, with captions like, "What do you think he meant here?" And am I missing something? Doubt doesn't need millions to be effective. It just needs the right people. Within weeks, my brother's calendar emptied, not dramatically, methodically. Projects paused, deals restructured, visibility reduced. Influence evaporated, and all the while no one could point to a single attack. There was no villain, just consequences. One evening, my brother sat across from me at the kitchen table, exhaustion carved into his face. He asked me quietly if I thought people were being unfair. I met his eyes, calm, steady. "I think people just want clarity," I said, "and when they don't get it, they move on." He nodded like that made sense. For the first time in his life, no one rushed to reassure him. When everything finally stopped moving around my brother, my family was forced to look at who he'd been and who I'd quietly become. The quiet afterward was louder than any applause my brother had ever chased. There was no headline announcing his fall, no dramatic confrontation, just a gradual absence where his certainty used to live. Invitations stopped, calls dried up. The world he'd built on momentum learned how to keep spinning without him. And for the first time, my family had nothing shiny to point at. Dinner conversations changed. My mother stopped leading with my brother's name. My father stopped repeating stories like they were proof of something. Silence moved into the spaces where bragging used to sit, and in that silence, questions finally showed up. Not about him, about me. My mother asked carefully what I actually did for work. My father listened instead of interrupting. Relatives who once smiled politely now leaned in. No apologies were spoken. They didn't know how to make them without admitting too much. I didn't correct the past. I didn't need to. Because reality had done something better than revenge, it had rearranged the hierarchy without my consent or announcement. My brother never asked me outright if I had anything to do with it. I think part of him knew. Another part didn't want confirmation. He'd spent his life believing power was loud and visible. Understanding what actually dismantled him would have meant rethinking everything, so we existed in a quiet truce. He no longer joked at my expense. He didn't need to. The room wouldn't have laughed. The night I ran into him again at a small gathering, no chandeliers, no speeches, he introduced me differently, not warmly, not proudly. Just accurately, "This is my sister," he said, no qualifiers, and that was enough. What satisfied me most wasn't watching him lose influence, it was watching everyone else recalibrate. Watching people realize they'd mistaken volume for substance. Watching my family learn too late that the child they underestimated had learned how to stand alone and sharpen herself there. There was no confession, no redemption arc. Just truth settling into place like furniture after a long move. I didn't win by taking something from him. I won by letting him keep everything he'd built and removing the belief that held it up. That's the part people don't warn you about when they dismiss someone quietly working in the background. They think kindness means weakness. They think silence means emptiness. They think humility means smallness. It doesn't. Sometimes it means strategy. Sometimes it means patience. And sometimes it means you're watching very closely while everyone else is laughing. Never underestimate the person who stays low, listens carefully, and turns humiliation into focus, because quiet strength doesn't announce itself, it arrives. If you want revisions, a darker edge, or a different ending tone, just say the word.